Hello, 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 and welcome back to Agree to Disagree. Kat is making me work now. So, welcome. We are going to be talking about climate change today. We have a few questions that you guys have been submitting to people. But before we get to that point, we should probably actually introduce our guest. And hiding behind this screen, by the way, Kat is just lurking because no pressure, no pressure. Cats, and by the way, if anything screws up in this stream, it is not my fault. I want to say that right now. It is not my fault. It is not my fault. I am not controlling things tonight, so we're all screwed. Hello to people, and if you have any more questions, because there are a lot of questions that we want to get through, but if you have any more questions, tag me. I will be taking note of them, and we will be putting those questions to our guest. So without further ado, Kat's change the bloody screen, will you?
Look at that. I pressed that button and it worked. It did it. Look what I can do. Look what I can do. Look at that.
This is the child that I'm dealing with. This is the child that I'm dealing with. Marcin, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about yourself?
Very shortly, my name is Marcin. I was working for the government, so you can say I'm a government shill, or I was government shill for quite some time. I was part of the delegation from my country for over a decade for several climate conferences, including the one in Paris, which you might have heard of. And right now I'm working as a head of climate team for one of the climate NGOs here.
So it's fair to say that you've been involved with climate change at a government level.
Yes.
Which is pretty impressive. That is pretty impressive. We've had loads of questions posted on my community page that I put out about 2 weeks ago. On that post, I did say that this stream would be last week or the week before. We get around to it eventually. So we're going to put those questions. We will put those questions to you. I can show them on the screen. And thank you to everybody that chucked them in. But also, if you can see the tag along the bottom, I know Crafty's mentioned it. If you tag Crafty in, every time I do I posted a question to you, Crafty can fire one from the chat. So this is your chance in the chat to ask whatever questions you want to a climate change expert. Should we go? Do you want to do the first question, Crafty, or do you want me to? Your call.
You have the questions. You're the
I have the questions. Right. You've not seen any in the chat. What I mean is if you'd seen one in the chat if you wanted to. But no, you're right. So if I press this button, it should. There we go. Right. So the first question. I'm gonna give that one a heart. Look at that. Great initiative, Cats. Well, thank you very much. What do you think should happen to speed up mitigation of climate change on a global level?
That's a very good one, very hard one. But first thing would be more people actually engaging in trying to convince the governments that they should speed up mitigation, because there is a lot of things going on the personal level. For example, where I live, we have actually a lot of people engaged, for example, in renewable sources. However, to really get the mitigation going, we need more people convinced, more governments convinced that they should do something. And there is, of course, a second small part of it, a lot of money to convince people, to convince some countries that they should do this. So
pressure from the public to the political parties. Do you think it's not going to come from political parties?
No, it most likely won't come from the political parties, especially where they don't see their political business in it. And of course, we have some countries where there is no real democracy, where there is no real civil society that can put pressure on the countries. So there may be money from developed countries could work.
Do you really quickly, do you want to give a rundown as to what actually happened in Paris, what was found, and why it's relevant, why it's important?
Actually, Paris was just a final step of a very long process, because the negotiations of the Paris Agreement started in 2011 in the final hours of the Durban conference, so-called COP. Which one was that? COP17. In Paris was COP21. Every year we have COP, with the exceptions of 2020 for obvious reasons. The parties agreed first time internationally, including the US, because we had the Kyoto Protocol, which was not accepted by the US eventually. So every party, including the US, agreed to the international treaty, legally binding, that they will be decreasing their emissions. The one caveat is that every country, every party determines their own contribution, determines their own ambition. And so right now the ambition that is presented by what parties agreed to is still not enough. We have something called assessment reports of the IPCC, so Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that comes every few years, that show that we will face the threshold of so-called 1.5 degrees. That is the increase of the global temperature change of 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial levels within 10 to 20 years, unless we'll have very drastic changes and very drastic emission reductions. That's a short version. Sorry.
Yes. No, thank you, because there are a lot of people looking in at the climate change issue, and it with the report that came out, I didn't read all of it, but I read a lot of it, and for a lot of people, it's so heavy and so dense that to actually read through it or to try and pick out the most important points, you get bogged down, and it's intimidating. It is intimidating. So
it's intimidating and it's very technical, but it's a scientific report, so that's something to be expected.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Just a quick, before you get to your question, Crafty, if you've spotted one yet. Rune, a message to anybody in the chat generally, but Rune Thornton, I saw you tag in the Agree to Disagree account. I'm only taking note of the questions that have been left for me on the Conspiracy Cats account. Crafty is who you need to tag. That was a good question you left, but I'm going to forget it. If you tag in Crafty Keeler, her things at the bottom, with that same question.
I already have it.
Oh, see, she's good. But tagging Crafty rather than me. Crafty, do you want to present a question?
Yeah, there's a few good ones that have come up. So Don Giovanni is asking, is it feasible to extract dissolved carbon in seawater?
That is a very technical question. I don't have an answer, to be honest. However, please note that if you have CO2 and you extract it into water, you get the carbon acid, essentially, so called of a soda. If you put it into the salty water, you can, of course, store some CO2 within water, but it's harder and harder as the water gets warmer. So, but there are some technologies that are trying to get CO2 from the atmosphere. They are still in the very first stages, and we cannot count on them. We will have to mitigate anyway.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll put one from here. I think this is very similar to the first question. Arctic Haze, I'm sure he'll be watching this, if not live, on a replay. Really intelligent guy. I know that for a fact. He says, how does it feel to know where the world is heading, but not being able to convince the decision makers to do something about it? Ties into the previous question there.
Yeah. Well, when at first you won't succeed, try again. And that's what I'm doing right now, working for this NGO here. And I'm trying to get to the decision makers and try to them to understand the problem and to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Crafty, have you got another one? We'll just bounce these back and forth until.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a question. It's not a question, but it's a really great comment that just made me laugh. We should really use all the methane, says Arto Rissanen, in making methanol and then making windshield cleaner fluids from it. That should cause mass blindness on drivers, thus reducing the emissions from traffic.
Okay.
I mean, it's well thought out, isn't it? It's well thought out.
But
I love it.
a real question from him. Does the depletion of the ozone layer really affect the climate at all?
Let's start with the thing about depletion of the ozone layer, because we are talking about two different phenomena right now, and actually the ozone layer is regenerating right now. The Montreal Protocol, which was created to fight the depletion of ozone layer, and it was created, I think, in 1988, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the few successful international agreements in the fact and allowed to decrease the amount of gases that were depleting the ozone layer at the time, and is still working to do this again and again. Right now, we have more problem with the CO2 and with some gases that came from the Montreal Protocol, of course, like hydrofluor. Sorry, I'm not good at English words for chemistry, but they are the chlors or something like that. Hey, HFCs.
Hydrofluorochloro.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not even going to try.
Don't even try. Yeah, but there are gases, of course, that are very strong greenhouse gases, but they are also removed right now from use, and they are replaced with the less problematic ones. So this is a good example how the international agreement could work. However, the climate change is a much more dangerous and much more difficult problem.
Hang on. Hydrofluorocarbons. That's not hard to say, Cats.
It was not carbon. It was from
okay.
chlorine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what threw me a little bit. Yeah. So something like that.
So yeah,
I should know that, really, teaching chemistry, shouldn't I? Anyway, although it's not my specialism. So, whose turn is it? Is it yours or mine, Crafty?
Yours.
Oh, yes. Right. This is from Eric Davis. How frustrating is it to have to constantly hear bad information that media outlets and politicians give out? I assume surrounding climate change.
It's quite frustrating, but we're working on it. We're trying to educate at least our journalists, some of our politicians. So we're trying to get there. It will always be hard. It will always be a bit onerous, but eventually, hopefully, we'll be there in a century or two. Brilliant.
Some good ones here. Right. Go on, Crafty, over to you.
Trevor Austin says CO2 is 0.04% of our atmosphere. How will changing mankind's 4% of the annual CO2 output change anything?
I don't know what he means by changing 4% of the annual output, because we need to mitigate essentially all the mankind's CO2 output. No, mankind contributions is not a mere 4% of the annual CO2 emissions. I don't know where this data come from, but it might come from like early 1900s. I heard this argument a lot. The most prevalent argument about this is that volcanoes are one of the most important sources of annual CO2 emissions, which is actually not true, because it's less than 1% of the humankind's annual CO2 emissions. And also to show how mankind's contribution works, I would have to do a bit simple math. I cannot present this here, but let's put it in the context. If you'll have Earth having the area of like 500 million square kilometers, I believe, give or take 1%, then we'll assume that the atmosphere is like 25 kilometers above of the atmosphere of the same density as it is at the ground level, with knowing the weight of one cubic meter of CO2 and the wave of 1 cubic meter of normal air, we can get that the amount of the CO2 that is emitted by the humanity right now, it's about 34 gigatons of CO2 each year, has the wave of about 2 millionth point of 2 millionth parts of the Earth's atmosphere. You can check these numbers yourselves. I don't have them right now. You can put it in Excel or something like that, and you'll get that this is just those 2 million those 2 parts per million that are the increase of the CO2 of the atmosphere each year. We're getting to the same level of emissions. So no, humanity is not 4%. Sorry.
Is that a common?
It's a very common. It's a very common one, and it's a very heavily used that volcanoes are the largest emitters of the CO2, which is essentially not true. It might have been true, as I say, 100 years ago, where the emissions were not that big. But even then, the humanity's emissions were quite large. So no, sorry.
Cool. Okay, I think it's my go. This one here from the TT guy. I'll give a heart for that one. I like this question. How do you validate the climate models, and how well do they perform compared to actual observation? And I'd also like to add a little bit to that, because obviously climate model, if you're going to observe how accurate a climate model is, there has to be a period of time involved to assess the accuracy. So what is that period of time? And
again, I'm not a climatologist, so I won't be able to answer all the technical details. But if you are looking at the latest IPCC report, you can see how the previous and past observations fit into the models that were used in the past, and that they are not always accurate, of course. There are still many uncertainties within the climate models that we are using. Some of them may even be ones that show that climate change might be more drastic than we are expecting. For example, certain things that happened this year, like heavy forest fires, heavy floods, were stronger than expected by climate models. So. So those models have to be adjusted each year based on observations, of course. But yeah.
But just for some people who aren't really sure what a climate change model is it essentially? Well, I'll let you explain. Go on.
I'll try to do my best, but again, I'm not a climatologist. So if there is a climatologist in the room, he's welcome to correct me when I'm wrong. Essentially, the climate model shows what will be the based on the current or sorry, but my cat decided that she wants to sit on the table.
Kitty. Show the kitty.
Of course.
You have to show the kitty.
If she,
Beep. Gotta love the cat.
No, he's gone.
No,
he's gone. The cat killed it. I'll send him a quick message on WhatsApp.
This is why you don't let cats near technology.
I'll just send him a message.
There is a question for you. Joe D asks, if Crafty wasn't here, would cats just stare confusedly at the camera?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That tends to be the thing I'm quite good at. I'm going for like the moody, what's the word? Cool kind of moody cowboy look, but it does come across as just confused and a bit thick. So yeah, I'm just going to send Marcin a message. I'll mute myself while I do it.
Okay, so hello people. It's nice to see everyone in the chat. Yes, Arto. As soon as he comes back, I'm asking that question because it's one of the most infuriating questions, or one of the most infuriating things that I come across when it comes to the debate on climate change. It just really annoys me. So I will be asking that.
He should be on his way back now.
Guys, if you have any questions,
Okay,
please.
I'm back. Sorry. I was trying to show the kitty as Crafty asked me, and somehow the computer
I know,
went
I'm
into
terrible.
hibernation. So,
Well, while you were gone, Crafty did find a question.
okay, perfect.
Right. So, Arto Risanen says, do you know about how much emissions could be reduced from moving from beef farming towards like cricket farming, but the efficiency of protein loss production would at least skyrocket. Right. Can we get over this hangover that yes, farming practices need to change, but small farmers and cows in particular are not simply the problem of climate change? Because that's one of the most infuriating things that I come across. If we just kill all the cows, then we'll be fine.
Oh, not really, because it's not about the cows, or not just about the cows. A lot is about the certain kinds of how the food is produced, how the CO2 just gets from the soil to the atmosphere. So yeah, the whole farming has to be changed, the whole farming system, and not just to let us eat crickets. But also there are the vegan part is not that easy, because soya, for example, which is one of the vegan foods, is a very big contributor to climate change. True that mostly as food for for cows, but still it's a very heavy contributor. Also, we have deforestation caused by not really sustainable food production, for example, in Brazil, which is also a problem, but also in some parts in Africa. That's also something that we'll have to deal with eventually.
Well, it just to follow up on that, right? So I used to be in goat farming, hence the goat in my picture. And one of the most infuriating things has been people just misunderstanding what farming is. I don't believe factory scale farming is actual farming, because I've been in farming. That's just production line animals. It's not actually farming. So when you're having this discussion, and this is to the chat, guys, when you're having this discussion, these trigger words of cows farting methane. First of all, they don't fart methane; they belch methane. And second of all, it's not really in quantities that's dangerous. What's actually dangerous is the farming practices behind factory industrial farming, which isn't real farming. So let's not attack small farmers because you don't like how industrial scale farming works, because what you're doing is you're putting the real farmers, the small farmers, out of business. And who do you think is going to buy their land? So it is a good question. It is a very good question. And it's one of the most infuriating things that I come across.
Yeah, just to say, in my country, the farming is responsible for about 8% of CO2 emissions. And when I'm talking with my colleagues from my team, we're saying it's the hardest 8% to eventually reduce. But mostly, yes, you are right that the large-scale farming, and industrial farming will be the problem in the first place. Yeah.
Well, it's also the case, isn't it, that on these industrial scale farms, they're just feeding hay, which is again, and soya. When they give cattle the
Exactly.
the pellets, they're actually mixing in soya, so they're actually creating the problem. Whereas farm-based or naturally grazed cows are eating a variety of things, and in fact, they don't much like grass. They like the herbs and the little things within the grass, not just grass. So when they have a varied diet, the methane is a lot less, because the makeup of the stomach is different. So
that's true, and also there are some possibilities to utilize the methane eventually, so it wouldn't be methane after all, if you tried.
Yeah. Okay. Cats. I'll put it back to you.
No, that went well. That did. Here is one that'll no doubt be an interesting one. What is your view on artificial weather as an attempt to reduce global warming? Should we use chemtrails? And I just wonder, what is the technology around that?
Let me start with the fact that we government shows don't talk about chemtrails. There are no such thing as chemtrails. But to be more serious, the geoengineering, because that's what we are talking about, is something that is very that has been thought about before, but there is a lot of danger about it because we don't know how the atmosphere will react to our attempts. Please remember that we had some kind of natural geoengineering in the past, for example, in 1812 or in 1888, when two large volcanoes erupted. I have been already talking about volcanoes, that they don't emit so much CO2 as humanity, but they also emit other gases that have some geoengineering potential that increase the albedo of the planet and therefore decrease the amount of solar radiation that comes to the Earth. And in both cases, in 1812, it was the Tambora, if I remember correctly. In 1888, it was Krakatoa. In both cases, we had a very strong winter. In 1812, we had a very strong winter, which caused a certain Napoleon to lose a war.
So is that those volcanic eruptions leading to the long winter? Is that then an effect of global dimming?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a case of global dimming, and you need to be very precise. Nobody have tried any experiments, as far as I know, on this. There are just theories. Hypotheses. I won't use the word theory for obvious reasons. There are some hypotheses how this might work, but they haven't not been tried. They're very risky, so they could be used maybe as last-ditch resort. But I will be very cautious, and I would try to warn everyone against it. Let's try the things that we know that will work. Reduce our emissions, and maybe try to, in the future, also get some CO2 from the atmosphere. There are some experiments on it. They are much safer than staking on the than working on the whole planet and the whole weather.
Brilliant. Crafty, your choice.
Flat Turd PhD. I don't know.
Hey, Turd.
Flat Turd PhD has a question saying, "Can I ask, are we looking? Because there's so much fear going on, and it's just grah. Can I ask, are we looking more at a kind of Waterworld like future or a Mad Max one?"
Okay, so let's say why not both? So part will be Waterworld, part will be Mad Max, and I'm not even really joking, because there is not enough water to cover the whole planet above a certain level. So there will be places which will be flooded. Those closest to the coast. I don't remember the exact numbers, but this will be like maybe 70 meters above the current sea level in total, in the worst case. But the rest might have heavy droughts, fires, which we have already seen last and this year. So in a way, we might be stuck between fire and water.
Oof.
Cool.
Damn,
right,
yeah.
my turn from one got here. Okay, so Dia Wood said that a quick calculation says that he can offset his own CO2 emitted from driving to work and back for a whole year with a donation. I don't know why I'm reading out that everyone can read, but why not? Donation of about £8 to Tree Plantation Uruguay. So effectively, I guess what we're saying is how important is the planting of trees for carbon dioxide levels as opposed to reducing pollution output?
Again, planting of trees is the last thing that we should. Well, it's not the last thing that we should do. We should still thinking about this, but this is the last leg of the trip we have to take.
First, it's not the biggest. It's not the. Don't have the biggest effect.
It's the thing we are doing. We are doing in addition to mitigation. And as for the offsetting of emissions, let me put it into the context. Certain big companies have offsetted their emissions to become more climate friendly, and they have bought shares in tree farms. I don't even remember where, but those 3 farms were caught in the forest fire this year. So all these offsets were destroyed immediately. So no, offsetting is not the way. It's something you can do in addition to reducing your own emissions and your own carbon footprint.
Cool. Just a quick, before Craft, you give us your question.
Go ahead.
I've still noticed some people in the chat are tagging agree to disagree. And I'm if you want to ask a question, Craft is checking out the live chat. I'm checking out the community post that left. So is scrolling across the bottom there, tag at Crafty Keeler. Otherwise, chances are it might not get picked up. Okay, have you got a question you want to present?
I have a lot of questions coming in. So there's a question there from Ruin saying, would depopulation halt the climate, would halt climate change, or would it have little effect? And if it does have an effect, how much depopulation would we have to see before? To be honest, I can answer this in a certain sense. Depopulation isn't the problem. It's the practices of industry that's the problem, in my view. So
yeah, the problem is not the amount of population, but the carbon footprint of each individual person. So even with 100,000 people on the planet, we can still have so much CO2 emissions that we'll see very strong climate result. And even with larger population that we have currently, because please note that even our population with so many starving people produces enough food for everyone and some. We simply have a lot of waste. No, the depopulation is not a problem or not a solution. The solution is the individual carbon footprint of everyone living on the planet. So reducing the usage of resources, reducing the, trying to use to recycle, to go more into the circular economy, and maybe not producing certain things is more of a solution than the depopulation.
Can I just really quickly, before you jump in there, guys, if you have a question and if you already asked me, I am taking note of the questions, so you don't have to keep tagging me and keep asking me the same question. Just letting you know, I am taking note of the questions.
Marcin has freezed on my screen. Is he alive and kicking on yours?
I'm hearing you.
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, so moving around. I just mean that the image is frozen. That's all. Okay, whose question is it? Yours or mine?
It's yours. It just means that your computer is rubbish. Just saying.
Okay. Okay. Right, let's have a look. This is a good one. I'm trying to skip past questions that we've already kind of had a variant of. How do we know specifically that it's human activity leading to the increase in temperature? Which I think is an important question. How do we know that specifically?
I think I've partially already answered that, because I've said that the human activity has led to the increase of CO2 in the atmosphere from 280 ppm, which, if certain warrior is watching us right now, are not unicorn thoughts, to about 420 ppm, so about 140 ppm within the last 200 years. Then the only question is whether the amount of CO2 produces enough greenhouse effect to affect the temperature, and the answer is yes. The recent IPCC report, which was published exactly a month ago, says that each 1 teraton of CO2 increases the overall temperature on the planet by roughly 0.5 degrees Celsius. And I think that's the answer, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. Crafty, your go.
A really, really good one. And I was contemplating leaving this to the end, but Clive Wells has a fantastic question. Is it already too late to prevent major climate change, or should we be looking at using resources to help affected communities rather than fight a losing battle to prevent global warming. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you can do both. But
we need to do both, because if you won't fight this losing battle, so we won't mitigate, we won't decrease emissions, the effects will be even harder, even stronger, and those populations, that vulnerable populations, will require even more resources. But yes, we also need to help those vulnerable to the climate change right now. And this is one of the things that is also discussed in the international negotiations. And to be completely frank, it's not an easy discussion. It's something that on the international level, on the government level, is always a very contentious point. So questions is very good. Answer is, as I said, we should do both as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That was your question, wasn't
it?
Yep. Okay, this one I think will be a good one for you. Climate change conferences and negotiations about what results should be achieved never take into the account the damage animal agriculture and the fishing industry do. I know Crafty's touched on that. It's going to be a controversial one. They only focus on emission from fossil fuels, etc. You can obviously see the rest of that yourself. I know Crafty's touched on that and was quite passionate about it.
Let me just answer, because it's about international negotiations, climate change conferences. And again, it's not true. There are discussions on agriculture and on fisheries during the climate change negotiations. The last COP, which we had in Madrid in 2019, was even called a blue COP because it was taking more involved look at the oceans. Of course, what's done within the climate change negotiations is always the effect of the compromise, because all the decisions there have to be done by consensus. So every party that is taking part in the negotiations has to agree to a specific decision and specific result. Otherwise, it will not be accepted. So we are always going into the lowest common denominator. But still, those discussions are there. Just not enough.
I'm just on a technological nightmare. Sorry if I ruined that for everyone.
I am going to challenge that, right? So the reason why it's so hard to talk about the farming and the fisheries industry is because, first of all, it's rooted in communities. So when you're talking about farmers especially, and fishing communities, you're talking about people who have been left in the lurch for everything else. So the only thing they have left is either their farming community or their fisheries community. So trying to, and the problem again is, just to go back to it, is people don't disassociate the large scale tankers to the small fishing boats. The large, like off Ireland at the moment, there's about 17 Italian, Spanish, and French huge super tankers. While we are not allowed fish, we have a quota. Every especially in Europe, every country has a quota. We're not allowed fish in our own waters because of this bloody quota. And the larger states have more fishing rights than the smaller states. So when you're talking about this, you also, what tends to happen is that the small farmers, the small fisheries, is thrown in and lumped in with the horrible and horrendous and damaging practices of the large scale farmers and fishing. So you need to have that kind of wherewithal to make the difference, and to explain to farmers, the small farmers, the real farmers, the real fishermen, this is not against you. This is not attacking you. We're not talking about you tearing down the rainforest in order to get more profit, because to be honest with you, my farm, the one that I was running, when I arrived on that farm, they were nearly 60 grand in debt. That's how much small farms are making. They can't make anything because the larger farms are taking it all. And so when you talk about that, you don't understand these 16, 17, 18-hour days, and then to be told, well, you're the reason why the planet is dying. So that's why it's so hard to talk about, because the nuances aren't discussed. So it's a trigger for me. It's definitely a trigger for me.
Well, you don't want to be scapegoated, do you? You know.
Well, especially with them, I call them fucking industry tourists, people that have absolutely no interest in your industry except to condemn you. If you don't understand how the industry works, then just coming in and saying you're the problem is a little bit simplistic, and it is very, 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 very annoying because we do work very hard. We do look after our animals properly, and then we're overlooked by the large farmers who are absolutely destroying the planet. So, yeah, rant over. Sorry.
Back to that question for anyone who's just joined. That if I just put it here, oh, it's gone now. Just a reminder, you do, as your job, take part in these government level climate change negotiations, or you did in your previous job, didn't you? That's
exactly.
And you've frozen on my screen again. So so what actually goes on in those negotiations? You're the man to ask. Crafty, is it your question or mine?
Yep. There's a few questions around individuals' effect on climate change. Now, you have touched on it before, but Tusk and Turtle Moves and the likes are asking, like, is it worth turning off my lights? Is it worth worrying about my own individual footprint when there's the likes of the Las Vegas Strip that has around 12 million light bulbs on every day and night? And is there anything to do that we can do to offset that amount of waste? Like, what can individuals do, and should they be worried about their own individual footprint?
Question one, yes, we should all be aware and involved in reducing our own environmental and carbon footprint. No matter what others do, we should start from ourselves. But then we also should demand from places like Las Vegas and so on to also reduce their footprint. And lastly, about the offsets, I think I've already answered the question when I was talking about the forests. But the offsetting is the hardest part. First, we have to reduce our own footprint and then think about offsetting what's left. But I know that fighting the heavy industry like Las Vegas has very large factories and so on is very hard part, and is always very tricky, and those will be the last to reduce anything meaningfully. There is a lot of greenwashing from certain industries. I don't know if you are aware of the term greenwashing.
Yes.
Those are the industries that say that they are ecological or climate friendly, when actually they are doing things like buying shares in the tree farm somewhere, which then gets burned in the forest fire because of the drought or because of the heat wave.
Well, not to jump on and ask another question, but there was another question on that subject of what is the difference between climate change and the carbon footprint? What's the nuances in that?
Difference between climate change and carbon footprint. Actually, carbon footprint shows how much CO2 you are emitting with your day-to-day activities, and of course, there will always be some amount of carbon footprint. Climate change is caused by the whole carbon emissions of our civilization. So, the amounts of what you are doing is part of what will happen in the whole picture, but you can always decrease your own, or your own, I won't say fault, but your own influence on the climate change.
Cool, good question. Right, here we go. In fact, I think you've just answered that, but it was this one. Why has a narrative changed? I'm not sure there was a narrative. Is it just perhaps conflating the two terms? But why has narrative changed from global warming to climate change? And isn't it just generally a rise in temperature?
All right. So we are still talking about the rise of the global temperature, global average temperature. However, in the individual places, in the individual countries, there will be a change in the local climate. So it's not always the increase of the local temperature, local average temperature. Sometimes you can even have some decrease in the local temperature, and still attribute it to the globally increased the temperature. So just to avoid the confusion, we are talking about climate change. For example, and I will give an example from Europe, of course. We have the Gulf Stream. So this is the sea sea current that comes from the Gulf of Mexico and flows along the coast of Ireland and Norway, that gives the Europe very mild climate. If it would stop for some reason, and there are some scientific basis for the possibility that it will stop within the next 10, 15, 20 years, the climate in Europe would change to something more like maybe North Canada or Siberia. Some people are not aware that, for example, places like Berlin are on the same par as the line below which live 90% of Canadians, or that Berlin is more or less on the same latitude as Irkutsk in Siberia.
Cool. Is
Hopefully
that you
not
and
that
me?
cool. What will be?
So not great. Look forward to that. Yeah. Crafty, have you got one?
Yeah, Kai Bogle asks a great question. Is there another ice age on the way for Europe if the North Atlantic Gulf Stream fails to meet fails due to the melting ice in Greenland? It's a great question. Actually.
It's a very great question. I think again, I've partially touched on this question, and I don't believe that there will be another ice age for Europe, because the amount of warmer air that will come to the Arctic eventually will melt the ice that will come there. So, but this is a question that my answer is based more on hypothesis than on certainty.
Okay, this next one, I'll be interested in your opinion from how you perceive this taking part in these negotiations at government level. A post here from Poyle 2152 talking about whole nations that just deny the idea of it. Is that something you've experienced in these negotiations?
Let me put it this way: in the negotiations, nobody really questions climate change. Even Kazakhstan, as far as I know, never said specifically that they deny climate change. Of course, in the part of negotiations I have attended, because it's a very complicated and very big process, Kazakhstan was never very active, so I cannot tell what would be their reaction. However, yes, I know that there are still even governments, even presidents of countries that are denying or sliding around the issue of climate change. I could name one in my country.
Name and shame. No. Crafty?
King Crew asks, is more trees the answer?
More trees.
You did touch upon the fact that the offsetting and the forest fires. So how are we to protect those forests once they are actually up and running?
This is again a very hard question. From my perspective, more trees are helping. But also there are other things that should be thought about. We need, for example, increase the number of marshes or pit fields where we can have the water stored. They also serve as a good, for example, a good storage of CO2 eventually, sometimes even better than forests. And they also help prevent. When you have peatland or you have a marsh, it helps to stop forest fires. It helps to stop fires at all. So this is one of the possibilities. But again, if we'll have heat waves like we had in Canada this year, where we had almost 50 degrees Celsius and very dry forest, there is not really much we can do to stop it.
Cool. Right. This is you, isn't it, Crafty?
No,
or is it me?
It's your turn.
That's me. I tell you what, I'm getting so Like, lost this. Here we go.
The old man is setting
I don't know
in.
how, because it's you, me, you, me, you, me. I think it's because I'm looking through these questions and I get a bit spaced out with it. Bullet Bill, realistic. It's a good question. This: how much of the world's power can come from carbon-free or renewable sources?
More than we need. That's very easy. The question is how to gather this power and how to deliver it to where it's needed. So it's not about how much can come from carbon-free or renewable sources, because, for example, we could have we could have a lot of wind turbines on the seas. We can have a lot of photovoltaics around the equator, where it could be quite evenly distributed, but then you have to deliver the power to where it's needed, which is mostly on the northern hemisphere. There are, for example, possibilities of creating, I don't know, superconductor. We have superconductors that already work in near room temperature. Of course, there is slight problem that they will need like 2 gigapascals of density, but that's just a small technical issue. But still, there are also possibilities of building, for example, the orbital power plants. Again, the question is how to deliver the energy from the orbit to the Earth.
So when you're talking about delivering the energy, obviously, we all know that over a long distance, energy gets lost and dissipated, this heat, etc. What is with our current infrastructure or the current kind of materials we've got, how far realistically can we send power from a nuclear power station before, it's just not worth it?
I'm not a specialist in the energy infrastructure, but I think that 500 to 1,000 miles would be a good bet for fairly efficient delivery. Not using the technology, like I said, like superconductors, where you have actually no loss of power in the long distance. However, the best bet would be to have smaller, more local, and more to the point power sources. As for the nuclear, I'm working for the Green NGO, so I'm not talking about it. But again, more seriously, if you are looking at, for example, at having as much renewables in Europe as possible, in my country, there was some study that we could have like 60 to 70% of renewables by 2030. And this is the country which uses quite a lot of coal. So this is a possibility. 100 is still a challenge, but eventually it should be possible, especially if you have proper energy storage technologies and facilities. And this is something also that's already worked on.
Brilliant. Right, Crafty, what have you got for us?
Oh, so many. What does this expert think about electric cars, says Chris Hayes, and where would we get the juice to power them all? Would it not be better for the world to use old cars until they die rather than create new ones?
Okay. If you are talking about electric cars and juice, I know this is a tricky question. I've seen, of course, a lot of memes about this, that you are using electric car, but it's powered by coal or oil power plant or even gas power plant. However, there is one possible solution because one of the issues with renewables right now is that they are, first of all, not really reliable, because sometimes there is not enough sun and not enough wind to power to give you enough power that you need at the specific point. However, the electric car, first of all, can be powered during this time when there is more than enough of electrical power from renewables. Second of all, sometimes it also can serve as a battery or energy storage. So there is some potential in using electric cars, but of course, as with every technology, you should take it with some grain of salt.
Okay. I've got one here. This, I don't know if this is linked to some conspiracy theory or something. Don't know what you make of this one. Who is a co-founder and active chairman of one of the world's leading carbon credit brokerage firms, Generation Investment Management LLP. Is that something you've come across? People questioned you on that before?
I haven't seen the name before, and if I'll have the short right, so it's GIMP, so GIMP, right?
LLP, Gimmelp, maybe. Yeah, maybe
So,
someone's having a laugh.
unless GIMP's asleep, so we'll have to wake him up.
If Dabbler's Den's watching, maybe he could tell us the answer to that. That'd be
perhaps.
Well, speaking of talking about people, Tim Osman is asking, what do you think of Richard Lindzen and people who, like him, who are commenting on the climate change issue when it's not their area of expertise?
Who's Richard Lindzen? I don't know. I don't know the person. So
Richard is, as far as I'm aware, he is a psychologist, and oh no, actually, sorry, that was someone else. He's an atmospheric physicist.
Atmospheric physicist.
Yeah, who says climate change isn't real, basically.
First of all, I would ask a question: where does he get this notion from, and what are the papers he's basing his knowledge on? Because there are a lot of people who even have the titles of professor, PhDs, and so on, who can say that the climate change is not real. But sometimes it's simply because their knowledge is not updated and based on the textbooks that were written or papers that were written like 30 or 50 years ago. In a lot of areas of science right now, anything that's older than like 5 years ago is already outdated. And even the papers from 5 years ago can be outdated.
Well, he calls climate change activists climate alarmists.
Again, I don't know the specific person, so yeah. I'm not from that country where
he's American. He's American.
He's American. Okay, so definitely I don't know his work, but I would ask what he's basing his ideas on. And again, I know some atmospheric physicists who have a very opposite view. I had the pleasure of talking to one 2 weeks ago. So
we've got Biggest Doggus, good name, saying that Lindzen is not really saying it's not real. That'd be interesting. I might have a bit of a go. It is a name I've heard, but I thought this guy was kind of like researching in the early 90s and not now. So I don't know. I don't know. But if Tim's still in the chat, you want to give us some more information on that, pop it in. We'll check out for you. But tagging Crafty and not me. Right, my question. Let's have a look. Okay. I think a lot of these you've already touched on. So let me just share the screen, and then you can say stop Crafty. You see one that's not been touched. Oh, there we go. Mr. Jones, 1972. Well worth a subscription if you've not been to his channel. I know you've touched on this, but I just wanted to shout him out. Is climate change man-made, and what is the evidence for this? I know you've already said it. You've already said how we know it's man-made. I'll tell you what, Marcin, if I just slowly scroll down, why don't you stop us on a question that you think you've not touched on yet, and you can answer.
How does CO2, the question from Tom, how does CO2 causes global warming exactly, and where to find the papers that show the phenomenon? I would start with the IPCC reports, because they are a very good bibliography of the whole research on climate change. So because that's one of the things that people don't understand with the IPCC reports. They are not the research per se. They are just the overview of the research that was done during the last 5 or 10 years about the climate change. So those are the scientific papers to start with.
Cool. Crafty?
Okay. There is a question here from Taddy who asks which of the renewables, i.e., like tidal, wind, solar, not nuclear. He doesn't want to hear about nuclear. Are more efficient for generating power.
My answer would be we should have a good mix of them. Because one renewable is too depending on one energy source. So a good mix of solar and wind, for example, helps to have a good mix to help combat the too big spikes or too low downs of the energy output and to balance the energy system of the country.
Cool. Right, I'll put these back on. Again, we're going to see ones that you've answered. Mm-hmm. How do you respond that it's a natural process and that humans are non-factor? You've answered that. This one was touched on with Tim's question about Lindsay. But I'll just let you say, so, I've asked you about this in the past. I've asked you almost this exact same question offline. So let's go with that one.
Okay. How do you try to convince eco people that Greta Thunberg probably isn't the best authority to be quoting in their arguments? All right. So my answer would be, I would say that Greta Thunberg is not the best authority to be used by any party. She's a climate activist. She raised the awareness of the climate problem, but she's not a climate scientist. She's just someone who was able to go to the politicians and say to them that there is a problem and it's their responsibility to do something about it. But if I wanted to direct people, climate activists, to scientists, again, I would point them to the IPCC reports. However, working for the Green NGO myself, I know that we are using IPCC reports in our daily communication. So we are not using us climate activists, at least from my organizations, we are not using Greta Thunberg as a symbol. We are using science, we are using the scientific papers, we are using the scientific information to get the message across.
Yes, I think when I spoke to you offline, I said I was just a little bit uncomfortable with the use of Greta Thunberg, not because she's trying to do anything wrong, but almost as if there's some sort of exploitation of it, because she was very, very young when it was started.
I agree. I agree that that was also my observation, that too often she's used as a standard, and by both sides. It's not just that the people from the let's say eco-activism sides are using her as a standard and so on. She was an inspiration to a lot of those people. That's true. But she's not used just by them, but also the other side uses her. Well, she's just a little girl. What does she know?
Yeah.
I've actually seen a documentary about Greta Thunberg recently, which was based on from her starting days up to mid 2019, when she was going to New York for the United Nations General Assembly. And there was shown that she is a very clever girl. She has Asperger's syndrome, of course, and she does not hide it. But she's a very clever girl. She ended her high school in top 3 of her year, I believe, in Sweden. So I would not also say that she's some silly girl, because even 19-year-olds or 18-year-olds, as she is now, can say a lot of very smart, very wise things. So we should listen to them. Not maybe take everything as granted, but we should listen also to young people, because they can see things that we are not willing to see.
Excellent response. Crafty. Da, da, da.
Well, I do want to just say, sorry, I've misplaced it here. Rusty Walker is in the chat. Hello to Rusty Walker. He says using Greta was to use an appeal to emotion, which to a certain extent is true, but it doesn't mean that she was wrong. So, right, there's Adam Lordy asks, have you seen some people against climate change using the argument that renewable energy sources cost too much in terms of upkeep, and they're not efficient enough to provide enough energy for our needs. Is this true, and what do you have to say about it?
First of all, I've seen this argument, and it was a bit valid 5 years ago. Right now, however, the renewables are very efficient. Sometimes they are more efficient than the so-called conventional sources. The one problem there is still with renewables, which I've mentioned, is that they are not 100% reliable. So you still need some energy storage to level out the energy output during the day. But they are getting more and more efficient, and they are getting more and more cheaper.
Brilliant. I think I'm almost at the end. Well, I am. This is the last one that you've not touched on, but it's not a question. It might be something you can pick one thing out of here. It's a lot of questions. So I appreciate you asking a lot of questions, but we can't go through all of them here. This one caught my eye, though. Okay, so this one caught my eye.
There are a lot. There are a lot of questions I see there, and. Why hasn't the climate warmed for over 6 years? A satellite and NOAA data show, although CO2 levels rise by 2-3 ppms annually. Actually, climate warmed during the last years. Every year is essentially warmer than the previous one. So I don't know on what data the question is based. Why does CO2 and temperature not correlate? That's not true. Again, there is a correlation. While the proponent of the question can say the correlation does not mean causation, still there is a correlation. Why did CO2 lag temperature when we look at the ice core data? Again, I would have to see the specific data, but we should take into account that there might be some problems with getting the right dating year to year when we are looking at the ice core data. How much longer would life on Earth exist if we hadn't started to bring it back to the atmosphere? This is a very hypothetical question. I'm not. I would not be answering this. How much CO2 does a plant need at least, and what is the optimal amount? I'm not a biologist, so I can't answer that. Was the medieval warm period global? As far as I know, not. It was mostly affecting Europe.
This is going to go on forever. You'll never get to the end.
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, I think if you go, you have the opportunity if you want after the show to actually go on to our community tab and really give comprehensive answers to this. But I'm worried that there are people here that are still waiting for their questions to be asked, and that is a lot of fucking questions.
Exactly. I'll add that. Crafty, I'm out of questions now, so tag Crafty in.
So that's why you decided. That's why you decided for these big fuck off questions because you don't have any more. Look at you. Right.
I'll get ready so I can see him.
There's a question here saying, does methane hydrate deposits destabilizing as temperatures rise pose a significant risk in the long term?
Yes, and in short term as well.
How? Like, can you explain a little bit? Come on.
No, because methane hydrates will release methane when they are warmed up. They are mostly in the permanent permafrost in Siberia. Methane is a very strong greenhouse gas. I believe 28 times more stronger. 28 times stronger than CO2. So the release of a lot of methane will cause a lot of problems and may cause positive feedback loop, which will increase the speed of global temperature rise.
Right. Next question. How much would it change if we change from EVs from ICE to EVs from ICE vehicles? How much change would that actually create?
To EVs from what vehicles?
ICE vehicles, ICE, I don't know. Have a
internal
node.
combustion, of course.
Yes.
Electric vehicles from internal combustion vehicles depends. The question, as I said, the electric vehicles are a bit tricky because it depends on where their power comes from. So if you are living in a country which has essentially no emissions from the power sector, it will change a lot. If you are living in a country where there is a lot of emissions from the power sector, then there might be even worse than using the modern internal combustion vehicles. But eventually, every country should switch to the zero emission or low emission power sectors, and then electric vehicles will be more efficient in this regard than the internal combustion engines.
Right. Next question. Leopold asks, how likely is it that the Gulf Stream would collapse in the near future, and what would we do if it happens?
Also, answering the first part, I don't have my crystal ball with me, so I won't say the chance. But there is a chance, and there are some signs that it is already weakening, as I've said before. And as for the second part, the Europe will be much harder to be. Well, people living in Europe will have much harder time during winter because the winter will get much harsher. That doesn't mean that the summers will be much colder. Eventually, they might be also even a bit warmer than they were before, but the winters might be as strong as on Siberia.
Wow.
Well, I have a question in relation to that. So, what is the process of discovering the strength or the weakness of the jet streams and the Gulf Stream? Like, what is that process?
I'm not. Sorry, I'm saying I'm not a lot of things. Almost quoting Dr. McCoy.
No,
But I'm just using the knowledge I've gathered before. There are a lot of people working on the ocean streams and jet streams, trying to assess their strengths, see how they react, see how they are behaving. So if they are seeing that the speed of Gulf Stream gets lower, if they are seeing that the waters are sinking earlier than before, then there is a warning sign that something's going on.
Yeah. No, I was curious because I've spoken to people who work in my old university. There is an oceanic research center,
so they might be more qualified to answer this than I am.
I got to talk to him a little bit, but I didn't get to that. I don't know why, but it just, while we were talking about it, it just jumped into my head. Right, the next question is from Slicer John 189. He says, what use is it when countries say in 10, 15, 20 years we will do XYZ? Are they just kicking the can to whoever is in charge then? Because they've done this, like, before there was Greta Thunberg, there was, what was her name? Severn? Saying the exact same thing. Severn Kula Suzuki said the exact same thing at the Rio Earth Summit 30 years ago. Is it a case, or have you seen with governments, because I've seen it with my own government, kicking the can down the road and pretending not to see climate change? I'll just, before you answer that, I will give just a quick thing. Down in West Cork, there was a pig farmer or someone that did stuff for pigs, and he had this thing where he would mechanically harvest kelp off Iceland, and he was allowed to do it. He tried to do it in West Cork. We stopped him. We went to our public representatives, made such noise right up the west coast of the country, and we banned mechanical harvesting of kelp. So yeah, so there are things that we can do, folks. There are things that we can do. And hello to Kitty.
Yeah. I can say this, damn Jim, I'm a climate expert, not a kelp farmer.
Clicked on the wrong one then, sorry. Star Trek reference, anyone didn't know what we're doing. Marcin, we did say we'd keep you for somewhere between an hour and a half. We're getting up to an hour and 20 minutes. Kraft, did you want to maybe filter out the best 2 or 3 questions, and we'll put those to Marcin before we wrap up.
Yeah, hang on for 1 minute.
While you find him,
there's 2 really good questions here. One is there any chance that global warming could help drive more dramatic tectonic events like volcano eruptions and less energy dissipating into the atmosphere?
I'm not able to answer that. There are some hypotheses that, for example, lower pressure from ice sheets could cause something like that, because they will change the stability of the current tectonic plate. So there is such a possibility, but again, this is something that is hard to measure. It's hard to get a good grip on, and I don't think I've seen any papers that were actually dealing with this idea. So no, I'm sorry, I can't answer that, at least in
that's actually one, Taddy, because Taddy asked that. Taddy, that is one for PhD Tony. PhD Tony, Tony Purcell is in our community.
I know PhD Tony, sorry.
He is a geophysicist.
I know who PhD Tony is, so hi. Yay! PhD Tony.
Yay! So he is that is his field of expertise. So Taddy, go talk to PhD Tony, and we'll get his. I mean, you might be waiting 20 years for him to finish a sentence, but
William Wallace. Oh, sorry. Just before we get the next question, before I lose it, William Wallace did ask this. I just want to say to him, we did pick up about geoengineering before, didn't we? If he wants to wind back, and why do I keep accidentally putting other comments on? What we're doing? Yeah, we did that earlier. There was a question about. They called it artificial weather in the question, didn't they?
Yeah.
And you did touch on that, but essentially it was. The answer simply was the effects will be unknown, but wasn't that your answer?
Will be unknown, and I think I also remember that there is a moratorium, at least partially, on the geoengineering, but not under climate change discussion, but under biodiversity discussions.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Right. Last question. Probably before I actually unleash one of my own. No, I'm joking. Alan Rhodes asked, what technology are you most excited about in terms of helping or seeing emerge to help with climate change?
I know I would truly love to have small-scale nuclear fusion reactors.
So nuclear
fusion, not to be... but a small-scale ones, ones that can be not like ITER that is currently constructed in France.
I was going to mention ITER because I was, I won't bore you with why, but I was looking into that the other day. Go on.
I think that would help a lot, because there is little to no pollution from nuclear fusion, and this can potentially can generate a lot of energy and controlled energy. But this is something that we might have still to wait for about 20, 30 years. Otherwise, possibly the orbital power plants, which would be using photovoltaics and could send a lot of energy to Earth. Of course, the problem is how to send the energy. One of the possibilities would be microwave beam, which would have to be directed in some uninhabited area just for safety reasons.
Is there such a thing?
Not yet, but I know that at least China is trying to have some
uninhabited.
Uninhabited. Well, Sahara, for example.
This is true.
Yeah, there are still few places in the world that are not really inhabited. So,
well, can you really quickly? This is my question. I told you I'd probably whip one out. Can you explain to people the difference? Because when we think of nuclear, we think of Chernobyl, we think of Fukushima, we think of Sellafield. Can you explain to people the difference between those kind of nuclear power plants, the large scale, and what you're talking about with nuclear fusion?
Yes. So nuclear power plants like Chernobyl, I still remember this this catastrophe. It was not far from here. Power plants like Chernobyl are based on the nuclear fission. So you have a very heavy atoms like uranium, plutonium, sometimes thorium, that are then fissioned into other atoms. They produce neutrons that produce nuclear reactions. So neutron heat from the split atom goes into the other atom, and so on and so forth. This produces a lot of heat energy, and this powers the power plant. However, this is the same energy that powers the nuclear bomb, and has one additional problem, that it produces a lot of radiation. That's more problematic ones, because you can still design the reaction so it dissipates more or less harmlessly, not with an explosion. However, it produces a lot of pollution as radiative material. In case of nuclear fusion, you have hydrogen atoms that are fused into helium atoms, and this powers slowly the reaction, produces heat again to be converted into electricity, but this reaction does not cause radiation, which is present in the nuclear fission.
Yeah, I think that's like people hear the term nuclear and they all automatically think like Fukushima.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, but that's not the same, because the nuclear comes just from the nucleus, so part of the atom.
Well, that was awesome, mate. I just want to thank you for coming on and answering all those questions. You've put in a hard graft there.
And sorry to anyone whose questions we didn't get to. I'm sorry.
I've seen the proposal that I would come again, and they will be nice. So maybe in 2 or 3 months we could do this again, if there will be a
right.
will in the community.
The person who said that was Taddy Bogle.
Yeah.
He lies.
He lies. Okay.
You're always welcome on, though. Always welcome. If ever anyone
if there will be the will in the community to do this again, I'm willing to come here.
I'd be definite for that. And I don't know how you feel about debating, but if somebody wanted to come, but I can speak to you all about that offline and see what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really appreciate that. For now, I know we've been off air for a while. Everyone's really busy, super busy, but we've got another show on Sunday. I'll just show that out, 2 p.m. UK time. Anyone who's watched the Conspiracy Cats channel will know that at some point in the past I did a debate with Kent Hovind, and there were a number of topics he wasn't prepared for. One of them was isochron. He was not prepared for that. One of them was isochron dating. One of Kent Hovind's subscribers, who seems a really nice guy, I spoke to him offline to arrange a debate. He got in touch with me on the comment section of that debate and said, come on, let's have it. Let's debate about isochron dating. So it will be me at 2 p.m. this Sunday with the Young Earth creationists debating about the age of the Earth. It's like I say, seems a nice guy, and I'll fire that stream up tomorrow, so you should be able to find it and bookmark it if that's something you're interested in. But other than that, that's me all chilled out. Marcin, thanks again. Crafty, have you got anything you want to shill?
The only other thing, I've been slow to get stuff done in the Discord, but we did have we did start the workshops and start the little mini debates. So for anyone that's looking to learn how to debate, join our Discord. I'll put another thing up on the community tab so you're able to join the Discord if you can't find the link. The other thing is on Saturday. I usually go live on Friday. I'm not going live on Friday this week because it's my nephew's birthday, so family time. So Saturday will be the Ion Society, and we are discussing what the history of freedom of speech and where we go from here. So yeah, tune into that on my own channel. I have Taddy Bogle helping me with that, so it won't be shit, hopefully.
Well, freedom of speech, even if it is shit, you're allowed to be shit.
Yeah, but I mean, my streams have a history when I'm running them to be nearly, not quite as bad, but nearly as bad as Kat's trying to run a stream. So I actually have Taddy Bogle who knows what he's doing. Can I see in the chat? Can I see in the chat hashtag cats can't tech?
Right, on that note, I'm going to end the stream before that happens. Marcin, I will let you just say whatever you want to say, and when you say the words goodbye, I will hit end stream.
All right.
Oh, so let me get the mouse over the thing. Okay, now I'm ready.
So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for all the questions. I hope that I've answered them to your satisfaction. If not, we may try to have round 2 somewhere in the future. Goodbye.